Thanks everyone for joining on a Wednesday, third day session. This is a good turnout, so happy to have everyone here. So I think I'll do a quick intro briefly of our panel, and then I'll have Adrienn come up and give a little bit of an overview of the research project that is the basis of this research, or this session. Given that it's Wednesday, we've all had 2.5 days to meet people and percolate. I think it's a nice idea to ground this session in that research, and the themes in that research, but then give our panelists the floor to talk more about what they've learned and what their backgrounds are in. So just a fair warning, we won't be only talking about the research, but people who ask questions, this is Mirko's orders, people who ask questions get a free brochure. I think there's only 3, so ask your question early. So my name's Anna Hermansen. I'm a senior researcher and the ecosystem manager at Linux Foundation Research. I work very closely with Adrienn on the panel here and our SVP Hillary in the front row here. We're a small and mighty team. And I've been with the LF for just about 3 years now, and really honored to always be at the summits and meet people and grow my network and learn every day about everything that is happening in this community. So we have Mirko Boehm on the far right there, or I guess your left. He's the Senior Director of Linux Foundation Europe, GM, calling all the shots. We have Adrienn Lawson, our Director of Quantitative Research. We have Christian New on the OSPO for SAP and on NeoNephos, and then Paloma Oliviera, who's with the Sovereign Tech Agency. So I will pass it to Adrienn to give an overview of our research.
Oh, and I'm so tall. Yes, so I'm going to be introducing the 2025 Europe Spotlight Report, and it's actually part of a series. We started this in 2022 with the Europe Spotlight Report, and that was actually a big study on everything open source and Europe. And then we expanded this into kind of the global sphere, and actually we are also doing a study on Japan specifically. This year is going to coming out in November. We also have a 2024 study if you'd like to look at that. And yes, this year as well, we did a specific Europe study, meaning that the survey is filtered for European respondents, and we're asking experts in Europe and doing interviews. The objectives of this survey series is so that we are able to track changes. Since we started in 2022, we do have data from there. There are some questions which are staying the same, and we are able to track how the trends are going. We're also able to do the regional analysis, as I said, with Japan-specific data and Europe-specific data. We're also looking at industry analysis on the different sectors to see how open source trends are coming out of those industries. And we are adding always new questions based on what's kind of coming up. So for example, for Europe, last year we had a CRA-specific question. This year we are also asking about AI. So these are the kind of annual focus areas that we can put into the research. In terms of the methodology, so we ran this study in May and June of this year. The survey composed of 45 questions on open source use, contribution value, and sustainability. The sample size for Europe is 316. The global sample was 851. We did 14 interviews led by Killian Osborne, who wasn't able to be here, but it would have been very nice, and I'm sure many of you know him. Interviews were coming from the private, public, and nonprofit sectors, and from 8 different European countries.
Thanks, Adrienn. So I attended the funding session yesterday, and I really liked the format of each of the panelists kind of giving an introduction to themselves and relate that back to the theme of the sessions, and then turning it over to the audience. So I think I'll try that format. I do have prepared questions if the audience is a bit shy, but let's start. I guess we can start with you, Mirko. So last year's survey, we were very focused on the fact that open source had hit kind of a watershed moment, and it had reached a level of maturity that we were really excited about. We had that panel discussion in Vienna, and I'd love for you to, a year later, tell us more about what you see happening in the space and how things have shifted since then.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Mirko Boehm, I work at Linux Foundation Europe, and one of the people that support this work on the report. I'm not an author this year, this is all on the team. So what has changed from our perspective is that there's this excitement of having like the first EU level regulation that speaks of free and open source software very, very prominently. That has settled a bit. It has become accepted and normal, and we are happy about it. And now we are going into more of an implementation mode. So Linux Foundation Europe has recently joined ETSI as a member. And that we do that so that we can participate in the standards development work that is going to define a lot of the practical details of how cybersecurity regulation will be applied in Europe. So we're going from, this is super exciting and it's a political moment, to, well, now we have to do the work. And yeah, we're focusing on that. So we're building up more alliances with the NISA, the European Network and Information Security Agency, and with Sensenelec, the other European standards developer, and across all other organizations. And of course, one thing is after the regulatory breakthrough is before the next regulatory breakthrough. So there are now other topics coming up, like the renewal of the procurement directive, etc., where we are planning our engagement, basically. But we're kind of happy about this development that we see in Europe, and the increasing awareness, the increasing levels of engagement, and yeah, we're basically trying to push this further and make it grow.
Okay, so less exciting maybe, but a lot more kind of on the ground work being done. Adrienn, next. Wondering if you can kind of ground the conversation in the survey findings. So given your work analyzing the survey results this year, where do you see Europe maybe really excelling, and where do you see some challenges or areas to push forward and some efforts in the future?
Okay, can you hear me? Great. So actually I would like to kind of substantiate it with the interviews as well, and the fact that Kaylee was asking a lot of experts in this space. Definitely one thing where I think Europe is excelling is the open source AI space. I didn't really want to mention AI here, but I think this is, we might not be touching up on this topic later on, but in terms of open source AI, I think Hugging Face has been able to create a very good community. The fact that a lot of AI conferences are happening in Paris, and the European space, I think, is something to excel. But again, challenges are coming in where a lot of open source AI startups in Europe are looking for funding and they're not able to find it, so they then go to the US. That is definitely a challenge that's happening in this space. And I think overall, what the report is trying to say in terms of European about the European open source space is what's needed is, I think, commitment. Commitment from the commercial side, that meaning leadership understanding the open source value, and we are seeing this in the survey that a lot of the people who are contributors and working very much close, and technical people working close to open source are seeing the value, but the leadership doesn't. I think Mirko might have a bit more nuanced approach on that. But what we need is commitment from leadership to be able to contribute to open source, either through the employee time, either through bug fixes, security contributions upstream, or funding. That's one commitment that needs to get out there. I know that a lot of us are aware of it, but I think commitment is where it's really gonna take ground, and as Mirko was saying, that now the work needs to be done. And in terms of the public sector as well, I very much like the initiative of the European-wide Sovereign Tech Fund, and I think Paloma might be able to talk more about that. That's, again, another commitment that needs to happen. Through my work in the kind of NGI European project, I was seeing that the European Commission does look out for strategically thinking about open source, how it can be funded, how it can help the public sector, how it can be, help small and medium organizations in Europe. But at the same time, I'm not seeing the commitment that I think needs to happen, and across different funding schemes. So the SCF could be focusing on infrastructure. There needs to be another kind of, I guess, similar to NGI, where grassroots innovation based solutions can come out. And there needs to be something in between, we were discussing with Mirko, in between the Horizon Europe kind of high bureaucracy projects and the NGI kind of grassroots, low bureaucracy funding programs. There needs to be something in between, which would help us really scale these open source solutions so that it doesn't stay as a hobby, but really help European companies and European users to use open source.
Thanks. So on that topic, I might, Christian, if it's okay with you, I'll skip over you and ask Paloma to introduce herself and the work she's done. And I think the main question, given that a major theme of the report is funding and commitment, where is that conversation right now in Europe, and what efforts are you seeing at the STA or kind of the Europe-wide funding that you're seeing that's working, and what progress do you think needs to be made?
So my name is Paloma. I think the biggest value that I bring to the report every year I talk to Kaylin and to the open source community, is having a pretty wide view about what does open source means from the community perspective, from a global perspective. I have been based in Europe for the past almost 7 years, but I come originally from Brazil. I have lived in Mexico, so I have a pretty good understanding and big involvement with open source communities since 2009, I would say, intensively. And that brings me a perspective that all the faces open source can have. And I say that because when we talk about open source, that is often shaded by a big weight that business and innovation, or now as a kind of a savior force to Europe can be. But it is good to do that while we consider all of those faces. And it is an interesting question when you say we need more funding, and everyone say, and all the studies and surveys often pointed out how much the same topics, maintenance burnout and lack of money. And what we often see is the projects sometimes do not even know how to deal with money, and the money will not solve most of the issues. Although it is important, I'm not saying that it's not, it is fundamental, and what we're doing at the Sovereign Tech Agency, it is help to sustain and maintain that open digital infrastructure for the common good, and it is quite important, right? Money is important. But it's not often what is lacking, and I hear that from many maintainers. What lacks is awareness, is usability, and I just came from a brilliant open source design talk from Eero that it's always around, how much that matters, like I think about the end user. And I bring that to today's survey because we have this maturity, we have this understanding about the importance of this big word that is being spoken a lot in Europe, that is sovereignty, but we cannot leave no one behind, and we need to address some systemic issues. I spoke a lot, is a really broad views. From the only funding perspective, this is one take, right? Money won't do the job. Advocacy will do the job. Usability will do the job. Changing the procurement for making that accessible and not just comparable to the market will change the things. But funding as well. And I'm very proud to work at the Sovereign Tech Agency because we're partially doing that for the past 2, going to 3 years now, is addressing what does supporting or investing in infrastructure means in critical infrastructure, which we often compare as a poem. One of my colleagues gave a talk yesterday comparing to a sewer system. So this is going really well, and I think it has been very inspiring for other countries to try to follow the same model, but it is still unique as far as I know in the global view. I think that's the main model that I find very interesting and solid, and another thing that I find very positive is how this is being done independent of the political humor. So independent, we're not talking about, although it's the government or coming from the government, it's trying to push this conversation as we've seen in other countries, like in Brazil, that it had a big push because it was the left in power and they understand the common good, and when it changed, everything broken. With that learning and understanding and robustness, we're trying to understand from another perspective and pushing for that being a common good that is independent from the political view.
Thank you. So Christian, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the funding being the one main theme from the report, but also digital sovereignty and where your NeoNephos project fits into the conversation of digital sovereignty.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Christian Neu. I'm part of SAP, and I work for the open source program office. So I think looking at the report, we see that there are contributions towards open source, but there are not many OSPOs yet. We have an OSPO, we work actively on that. I'm responsible for publishing all the projects at SAP, and with that, we also just announced the NeoNephos Foundation this morning. Also, Gab showed in his keynote presentation again, I think the headline of NeoNephos and the founding partners, not the projects, but that's what we are currently building together with Linux Foundation, a new foundation, and to keep it short, we are building digital sovereignty for Europe without vendor lock-in. So basically multi-cloud provider functionality, which we also run for SAP. And we are also part of the IPSI-SYS project, which is called Important Project for European Common Interest for Next Generation Cloud Infrastructure and Services. And this is really important for Europe, and I think that's also part of the report that we are talking about. How can we be autonomous? How can we build our own infrastructure? That is what we are completely doing. And compared to the sovereign tech fund, we are also not only investing in the maintenance, but also in the next generation funding for Europe. So I think that's a big difference. And but we are also using doing upstream contributions, downstream contributions. We are doing basically everything, and we are also trying to look how can we work together with the projects. We don't need to have like every project in our foundation, but how can we support the projects which we use and bring the developer power into the projects to have these contributions. So with that, I think what you said also regarding funding, funding is important, right? But we also see it when you do not build up the community right now, you don't have anyone else, and then it's maybe only SAP. That's not what we want, right? We want to build up a community, money helps, but you need to foster community, speak with the people, be on conferences, advertise it, and bring them into the project that we have that belief to be independent as Europe, and to give also small, medium companies a chance to build up a cloud infrastructure for hosting, for example, on latest cloud native technologies, where you can just use the benefit of having open source and not reinventing the wheel hundreds of times and using something which is quite old at the moment.
Thanks. I might ask one question and then turn it over to the audience if you have any questions. Just in that, thinking about what you said, Paloma, about it's not just money, it's awareness, and I'm also thinking about the research we've done on sovereign AI and the need for talent, and still that kind of global collaboration ethos is important despite the appearing to be fragmentation that comes with a sovereign system. So maybe I'll ask Adrienn first, in your work that you've done with NGI Commons, where do you see that talent gap, and what kind of thoughts do you have on addressing sovereign systems with talent?
Yeah, so actually in terms of talent and collaboration and sovereignty, when I do think about that, first thing that comes to mind is that talent is everywhere. So that's why sometimes some of the sovereignty discussions, if it's kind of leaning into, okay, we need European developers, kind of these projects have to be coming out of Europe, that's where I feel a little bit conflicted, knowing that there's so much talent out there all around the world globally. And so I really like when people do even with the European Sovereign Tech Fund, they are saying that we would like to fund everyone who's contributing to open source, not just European developers. And I think that will be what's really important, and Europe can lead by example here. And to be able to, just like with the Neonifus project, which is, I think, a great thing to actually get companies, the government, this IPSA initiative all together so that we can collaborate together, be it, whatever companies around the world who would like to, are committed to collaboration and trying to get all of us ahead.
Mirko, any thoughts on that?
On contribution in particular, the report says that there are many companies still that, especially companies, we sometimes like to talk about the businesses involved, right, who consume a lot of free and open source software, but don't necessarily contribute to it. I think 32% was the number I recall of organizations that also contribute back. And I think that's a missed opportunity for most of them. Why? Because contributing back is not just a matter of making sure the software does what you need to do, the bugs are fixed, the features are added. It is also a knowledge transfer mechanism of expertise from the upstream community into your company. If you have a group of your team members participating in upstream development, after a couple of weeks or months, they will know exactly how this project works. They will be technical experts on this. They will also know what the technical development direction of this project is, which features will be added 6 months from now. It's your best radar on understanding where the ecosystem is going, and maybe where you will have to invest because some features that you're hoping for are not coming on the current roadmap. It's also a reason to engage in the governance of the projects. My call to the businesses that are here is don't just see contribution as like giving back to the community. You're giving back, and at the same time, you're taking knowledge and expertise, and you bring this into your company. And the good thing with knowledge and expertise is it doesn't diminish if you learn something, right? So you're not taking it away from the community, but you're bringing that in-house. And sometimes when we talk about sovereignty, what we want to see is that we have the freedom to decide which systems we use, how they should be run, and if we're not happy with one system, switch to another, and if we're not happy with one service provider, switch to another. And one of the key building blocks of being able to make such a change is expertise. Understanding how the systems work and being able to pick the replacement for what you don't like. And that's one of the key arguments for actively engaging upstream and contributing to it. So that's my plaidoyer for more upstream open source contributions by our corporate participants.
Yeah, I think in our report we use the term capacity building and how digital sovereignty doesn't necessarily mean a fragmentation, but or necessarily being built in Europe, but that capacity building needs to happen within Europe to be able to contribute to that community. That might have been a quote from you, Paloma, maybe not, but do you have any comments on that, given your work at STA?
Yeah, I would like to expand the understanding of our collective thought on this capacity to not only creating more experts or educating more experts to become contributors, and I super agree the upstream contribution would bring so many benefits, but also to the end users, and that literacy is, when I say usability, is what I have in mind is, for example, how many open source projects cannot compete with closed source projects because the users don't know how to use it or they are not ready to use it. So this literacy, especially now with the growing AI, become even more critical, so we can have a population that understand the technology that it's using, because that is who will affect at the end. And what I say a lot, what I spoke a lot with Kaylin, it was exactly about that, about this education that is based on literacy and usage. I have recently spoken with a Linux kernel maintainer, and he was stating me that, like, we basically have solved all the technical issues, we're ready to go, but why we're not still dominating the market? Because people still have the imaginary that open source is complicated, they do not even want to try it out, And this is, in my understanding, another fundamental part to tackle in academias, how we're teaching the people that are coming to become the new professionals, but not only to say they need to be the next contributor, but how we are addressing technology and who are using this technology.
Yeah, and that makes me think about our conversation, Christian, yesterday about IPSI and how it, in maybe a different sense from STA, the funding is for innovation building and newer projects. And could you maybe share more of what we were speaking about yesterday and about IPSI?
Yeah, so in general, it's a project with the amount of 3.5 billion euro, which is split around 12 countries in Europe, 120 companies or research facilities working on that, and that's something where we want to drive innovation. So I think that's a really big chance over next years to bring up that development, what you were talking about.
Yeah, thanks. So I said I'd turn it over to the audience, and I would love to do that. Remember, you get a free booklet if you ask a question. So, oh my goodness, okay. Gentleman in the front, I think I should pass this to you.
Thank you. One question. In his keynote this morning, Gab said there's no such thing as European open source. Open source is global. So I would like to ask, do you think that's true? Or do you also see indicators that there are barriers, maybe increasing barriers, regional barriers to the use or contributions in open source?
Should I take a little bit? So from a Neonefos perspective, I mean, you're right. So we are not restricting contributions just for Europe, but we are working on a global base. We are a global company working globally with people. We want to have global contributions. Therefore, we are not only looking for European companies joining the foundation, as we are also using, of course, Kubernetes, right? I mean, the whole CNCF ecosystem, that's there. Why should we reinvent it? But of course, you have the problem, what happens if GitHub is shut down tomorrow? I think that's something where we need to consider how about the usage of GitLab or alternatives. But in general, I think you are losing something if you are just thinking about concentrating only about Europe.
I would like to encourage everybody to look at the contribution statistics of the CNCF. They're all online. There's a great website about it. It's all visualized. It's really cool. And you can group it by countries, which is always just a guess, like how do you know where a contributor comes from? But we can guess it somewhat. And interestingly, it's pretty equally distributed across the globe. And these are the massive open source projects. They're really big. They have thousands of contributors. And it's almost like, I'm exaggerating, but it's like 1/3 Asia, 1/3 Europe, 1/3 America. And that tells us something, right? If we would say, oh, we want all the developers to be in Europe, then we basically get 1/3 of the innovation potential and the creativeness that is out there. So I'm, as you know, a big fan of global and open collaboration. There's no argument against European autonomy, like decision-making power, being able to define your future. But I think there is an argument against European source, because I think it's not European open source if you say it like that, because if you restrict it, it's not open source, right? It's free for everybody for any purpose. So either it's open source or it's not. So we can either have open source or we can have European source. And I think I learned a very good sentence yesterday, and that is, it has never worked to fight protectionism with protectionism, and maybe we shouldn't try.
I just would like to add on that although it is global, it is quite important to foment local initiatives. First, because there's some power of some cultural power when you connect and you can do it in your own language. Otherwise, this is one issue with open source diversity, is just having mainly English as the main language. So it takes out of a lot of your comfort. So having these local initiatives that respect both technical issues like umlaut character. It's a technical thing. And so having the regional open source groups that could connect is very powerful. Not restrictive in a protectionist way, but to have more diversity in the power of what innovation can actually be that comes from this diversity of the local.
thank you. Oh, thank you. The question is a thought, a collective thought experiment. I will read this, of course, and then my question would be to whom I should forward this from your point of view in order to be fluent on the momentum. Is my question clear? Yes, I hope.
So who should you forward this report to as the audience? So it does have specific sections on the European public sector opportunity, and we also have a separate report on that actually. But so also to the decision makers, but I do know that a lot of us are trying to get to some of the politicians' ears and trying to say things. Usually they don't have the time to read reports, so it would have to be a bite-sized information of all of this that's being said here. But definitely on the public sector side, and also, I mean, one thing that's kind of challenging to me to see is that I'm seeing this narrative from some of the digital parts of the European Commission and telling us that open source is very important, they understand this, but at the same time, I think Paloma had very good statistics that are in the report, which is that 96% of the European governments and bodies are using Microsoft Office for all of their administrative tasks, and I think only like 0.5% of their budget is going out to open source tools. So definitely that's something that I'm not sure what will be the mechanism that will really get us there, because I'm looking at all of this in very big picture, looking at a lot of industries, a lot of verticals, but that's one point. And then the other point is actually the commercial side that I've already touched upon, and in this report, we try to get into the kind of open source value of it, but we are going to be doing a contribution ROI study specifically where we are trying to kind of confirm that, okay, contributing does give your company's advantage. It might be even, cheaper to contribute rather than to fork and maintain all of those different open source components. So we will try to get to that, and those I hopefully will be very influential to the leadership that's out there, to actually get into your own organization, see the actual like small scale things that are happening in your organization, but also in like big picture. Okay, we asked like hundreds of organizations who are saying the same thing. Their employees are seeing that there's a lot of value, and I would rather contribute than fork and maintain for the rest of my life.
Could I also add something? So looking, so the question would be, where would you address it? In which state is your company right in? So there are theories about maturity levels. Are you just consuming? So maybe developers are using as they don't know that they're just adding that as a dependency, right? And then the question is, okay, so what can you do? Do you create an issue or feature request or whatever? And then you're going up the ladder until you do that more intentionally. The board is getting more involved, or the management, and then you're doing it later on purpose, applying these standards to your company. And that's somewhere you should go into your company, start the discussions. But I guess it's hard coming from a bottom-top approach.
I would like to add one thing, and that is you can forward this report to anybody you like, because of course we are licensing them under Creative Commons licenses.
Thank you. I wanted to piggyback on this question, and also based on something Paloma said. What about the literacy and usability and awareness and people actually using the system? What is needed there? And I mean, I work at a university, so you can forward it to me. Well, I haven't, but what can be done to increase that kind of awareness?
Accessibility? Ooh, all the way. Good question. I do think there's still a very technocentric thought and understanding what open source means, starting through its definition. We usually think open source as the legal right to share and reproduce, and it's not, right? It has become so part of our culture, and there's so many definitions. For me, it's a tool against asymmetry. And I think in the heart of all people who love open source is a little bit of that, right? Is having a different world, possibility of a different world. But if we just focus on the code and still keep on pushing for this technocentric approach, we have a big issue. And so this is one thing. The other thing is how much we get lost in those technical issues and do not connect with our neighbors. Other thing that we recurrently see, it's how people are trying to solve the same things instead of putting resources together and communicating to one another. Part of this is the beauty of the freedom of being free in the sense of frei, libre. But part of it is also an unsustainable way of doing things. And when we can talk more about a culture of collaboration and sharing, we can involve other bodies, other perspectives, and think about... Toby Langert has a great talk from years ago that he talks about the priority of constituencies, that it's based on the W3C standards and how should we prioritize open source. And this is a beautiful thinking because it starts from the more fragile point that is always asking ourselves, who will this in the end affect? For me, it starts with this way of thinking, how we are doing the work we're doing every single day. It doesn't matter if it's one line of code, it still needs to be humanly readable. So for every little thing that we do, giving the importance from the common good that it will bring. But also the laws, like European Accessibility Act, is pushing that from a top-down perspective to say, oh, you don't want to think about it, but now you will. I think that's great. It is one way of enforcing that. But literacy, last point. Literacy for me is fundamental. I started with open source teaching all around in the countryside of Brazil about free software. That's how I got in touch with open source. And that was teaching GIMP, like visual tools, so people could do the work and being professional using free software. That changed everything. It's when you put that in the public imaginary, in their tools, how they use it, so they're not stuck on the way Google do things on their tools, or Microsoft, or the big players. We have our own way to do things. It has to be great, but we need to show people how to. And I would bet a lot. I would put, if I had decision on the money, I would put everything on putting those digital centers education around the decentralized places around the most countrysides, mostly focus on kids and elderly. That's where I would have bet. Vote on me. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Anyone else? Okay, I've seen a hand floating in the back. Okay, I just don't want to prejudice the front row.
Yeah, thanks. I also would like to add about what you mentioned about academia, and from my experience, actually from Brazil as well, is that indeed I did computer engineering. I think they mentioned open source once with Linux. We had all the proprietary license for free for us as students, so we are pushed to use this since the beginning. And then I also heard from an intern here that they never heard about open source here and doing university. I was like, okay, that's weird. So that might be something that we can change inside the university for the new people getting out of the university, at least knowing about it. And I mean, one class on the whole 5 years will be something, but it could be better pushed in there. And then people will be more, I don't know, aware of what open source is and be used to use it and see that's indeed not as like something really hard.
Very good point, and I would say I also dabble in academia and teach a course on open source and intellectual property. Sometimes it's easier to actually make people use it than to explain to them what it is, because they actually learn what it is by experiencing, oh, I can just get this for free, and I can even look at how it works. So I think one answer to your question as well is education as early as possible, and we need to have a bit more of a principled approach. I truly believe that Python and Jupyter Notebooks are the best way to teach math from 8th grade on forward. And it's a free tool, and every student has it, and they can experiment with it, and they learn a programming language playing on the side. So that's something we should think about. And it's not necessary to teach them like the 4 freedoms in 8th grade. They will figure it out by themselves. They're smart kids. But make them use it. Yeah.
Try to compete with the free one that they get first. Yes.
Yeah.
And even I'm just thinking about when I learned R in my master's degree a while ago, and you don't really learn what the concept of open source is. You're just all of a sudden using this really powerful free tool, and so learning that kind of what even is open source, I think, is a critical piece that I at least missed in my education. So I think we're at time. Not to take the last word, but I think we're at time. Do you want to say one last thing?
There was one final question, maybe.
Oh, okay. We can go over. Was there one? Maybe? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you were leaving.
So I'm the treasurer of Python Software Foundation, and I just happened to know this event like 2 days ago. So I'm the late bird. So there is a common question that everyone was talking about because of the recent post that we talked that we ran out of grants to give to a community. A lot of money goes to academics or stable organizations. The thing is that what we are doing actually is to give to community, those that, what Paloma said, like communities that actually set up in their local areas and learn out of curiosity. They might not have the money because they just want to learn. That's the beauty of open source, right? And right now, a lot of companies are not understanding this, and that's kind of the reason why we are running out of funds to support all these communities. So we see very direct investment from large organizations directly to the language itself. However, there is more than that. The whole organization has governance, has also to build new talents. We have people from the community that learn that way. So my question to you is that how can we actually convince all these people to see it that way, that we are not only the language itself, you need to also nurture the younger ones who don't belong to the academics, who don't have the money to go to the university.
I come from communities. For me, is that what helped me change my career, change countries, and I learn, not in the school. Although I have a master's degree, I never heard any place around this, right? It's tough. I'm not sure how to convince them, but I know the power of one. And one of my main role models is Jessica Green. Is for a long time community leader for Paloma Berlin. And she was the one that taught me, even when I was an intern, changing my career, well, go ask. And maybe it was a fortunate time that we had a lot of money of marketing, and I was in a private company to share. But it was saying, I need money for my community. And I was an intern, and I got, I don't know, $800 for T-shirts, $1,000 for buying books and telling others about the importance of open source. And it comes a long way. Sometimes we can do those exchanges, but just asking and not depending on the top-down, but maybe, I truly believe in the power of one, especially when it comes from the communities, like making your community awareness or putting people together to teach, to share this knowledge and share the space. It's actually not much. I feel like just a room, just let us be in a room that is comfortable, right? We just need to be covered from rain, sun, and sharing is not a lot, but I would bet on that. A short notice thought.
Thanks. I think that's a nice place to end the power of one. If you have more answers for the question, we can take those maybe offline. I know Adrienne and I have to run to a meeting, but it was really nice to chat with you all, and thanks so much to our panelists for giving their insights into this topic.